All right, we are recording. Okay, let me get back here. Okay. Yeah, I kept this really simple just because I know there's varying degrees of familiarity with the products. I'll keep it really basic, and then chime in with questions or wait till the end. I mean, it's going to be a pretty simple thing. I kind of wanted to give a little direction from the people listening, kind of what their main concerns were, but I'll kind of go through my brief overview now, and then we can kind of dig in and get in the weeds on some different parts of it if you guys want to, or whatever questions you have. Basically, I think one of the first things that came up was the different buying options. Now with the gasket guys taking this on and starting to get into it in the field with some people, I kind of wanted to start off with that part of it, and then we'll get into the product part of it after that. So really with the buying options for hood filters, is you've got several options. So online, obviously there's a ton of choices. There's us, there's Tundra, All Points, Webstron, Amazon. There's no shortage of options for hood filters online. That's where obviously we made our mark. So a lot of restaurants will just buy them themselves, put them in themselves, and they're done. Another option that a lot of customers use is just buying them from their hood cleaner. So by law, any commercial restaurant has to have their whole hood, duct, and exhaust fan inspected and cleaned quarterly. I'm sure you guys have all seen the little sticker on the front of the hood that proves when it was cleaned and when the next one's due. So a lot of them will just wait until the hood cleaner comes out, and the hood cleaner will say, hey, you need to replace, XYZ number of filters. Here's the sizes. And they'll go ahead and just put it on their job as selling them, a filter or two. So that's another option. And some of those hood cleaners, to be quite honest, I mean, because I go to the trade show every year, and a lot of them will say, if some of them will sell directly, and then others will tell them, you know what, we don't really mess with it. We don't have time. They really just want to go from one hood to the other. And they'll just give their customer our website or phone number. So that's another option. The next option, and this is becoming, you talk about trends, the biggest trend we've seen is a hood filter exchange service. And I don't want to get too in the weeds on that because that's a whole conversation in and of itself. But what that is hood cleaners will, this is separate from a cleaning. So they'll say, okay, we'll come out and we'll take all your dirty filters out and put clean ones in every 3 days, every 5 days, once a week, however often they need it, depending on, the system and what they're cooking. What that does is that alleviates the hood cleaner trying to clean the same dirty filters and put them back in when he comes out every 3 months. It keeps the restaurant from having to try to clean them themselves. And it just basically keeps the system operating more efficiently because you've got just spanking new filters in there, no buildup or nothing. So that's kind of becoming a thing. A lot of hood cleaners are realizing they can make some good money on this. A lot of restaurants cannot stand cleaning their filters, and a lot of them just don't do it. So that's becoming a big trend. And a little bit of a backstory to that trend is a lot of where that came from were local municipalities cracking down on restaurants putting their dirty filters out in the alleyway and spraying some harsh chemical and then rinsing them off and letting it drain down the gutter. Restaurants are doing it, the hood cleaners were doing it, and I mean, we've seen that all over the country. Where I think it's Ohio or Indiana, I'd have to look it up. They take it very seriously. I mean, you can get a huge fine if you get caught. So they kind of just took that ability away from the hood cleaners in the restaurant. So that's kind of where that's coming from. And then you got restaurants that just haven't purchased filters in years. They haven't even looked. They might not even know they need them. So those are basically your 4 options for where to get hood filters. Online, you're going to find, very competitive pricing. You're going to be able to shop from one brand to the other, one website to the other, different material types. So you can really shop around and price hunt. If you've got, technical questions as far as fire code or anything like that, you can access a lot of that online. The only downside to that is if you are having to return them, they didn't fit right, you might have ordered the wrong size, you've got a hassle with returning them, waiting on the right ones. And then also if you're ordering themselves, you've got to take the old ones out, put the new ones in. And now I know a lot of restaurants will just throw the used ones in the trash. You're not supposed to do that, but let's be honest, that's what most of them do. So that's the part of the good part about buying online is you're just getting really competitive pricing. The hood cleaner, they'll usually give a really good price too. That's kind of an add-on service to just being a client of theirs, is they're not trying to make a killing. I mean, they'll make a little bit of money on the filter, but that's not their bread and butter. They're just offering it as a service and they just charge a fair price. A lot of hood cleaners will just charge what we charge less, like 5% or something. They'll put them in, they'll take your old ones, they'll make sure that you got the right size, they fit right. The downside of that is a lot of times the hood cleaner will say, well, okay, we'll bring out the new set on our next cleaning. Well, that's 3 months from now. Or, yeah, we got to order them and yeah, we'll schedule, to come back. Well, Joe will swing back in a couple of weeks and, stop out. So a lot of times, a lot of people have this assumption that hood cleaners have filters with them. No hood filters or hood cleaning companies carry filters with them, unless they know they're going to a job where they're probably going to need to put them in, or they know from last time they're due for new ones, but they don't just have them on their truck. They take up way too much space. I mean, imagine, a 20-inch by 20-inch pizza box, which is about the size of what a filter is. Now, and the average hood takes 5 to 6 of them. You're going to carry that around in your little van? They just don't do it. So good and bad with hood cleaners. Filter exchange, you don't actually buy the filters. You just pay for the service. You don't ever have to clean anything. You don't have to have your staff sitting there scrubbing on those things. You got them loaded in your dishwasher. You still can't get them clean. It really is a hassle. That's the biggest complaint we have, is that don't get cleaned, or when they do clean them, it takes forever. So you basically just have someone coming in and doing it for you however often, but it is going to be the most expensive option, to have to, you're paying someone to come out to do that. So it's a great service, but it is a little spendy. Those are kind of your different options. We'll go ahead and get into some specifics about the products themselves. The number one issue is UL classified versus non-classified. Now, some people call it listed, UL classified. It's a little different, but for what we're talking about, it really doesn't matter. If either they have the UL logo or ETL logo, or they don't. Now, the biggest thing we run into, well, and again, NFPA 96, that's National Fire Protection Association Code 96. IMC is an International Mechanical Code. State and local codes, the hood itself will say filters must be listed. They use the term listed, which really means UL or ETL classified. There's a lot of non-listed filters out there. They're, 12, so someone says, oh, I can get one for $12. Well, yeah, but there's no maker's mark, there's no manufacturing country of origin, there's no company name, there's no UL listing. And we see a lot of that, especially with the just general restaurant supply companies. They say, oh, look at how cheap this is, and it's stainless steel. Well, you can imagine, the one thing, that's the thing people don't understand, is they think, oh, the hood and the fan. The hood and fan don't do anything. Really, the hood is just a containment box to try to contain that smoke and grease that comes off the cooking equipment. The exhaust fan just draws that air from the hood out to the roof. the thing that actually does a function, like for fire safety, is the actual filter itself. It keeps that grease from entering into the ductwork. It also, if there were a fire, it would keep that fire from spreading into the ductwork. So the idea that, oh, that the filter doesn't have to be UL listed as long as the hood is, that's something that like people like Webstront like to tell people, but it's not true. And we've actually seen situations, we get calls from insurance companies asking us about this stuff. And there's been times where, you know, someone who will have a fire and it turns out that they were using cheap non-listed filters when it clearly states on the hood itself, in the warranty of the hood, that you have to use listed filters, and they didn't. Now, and became a huge legal thing. I mean, so people really are risking when they use non-classified filters, but half the time they don't know it. Like on Webstront, it doesn't indicate if it's listed or not. And if you chat with them, which I've been known to do several times, they'll tell you that line, oh, as long as your hood's UL listed, you're fine. Well, that's a complete lie. So that's the biggest thing. Make sure you're using UL classified. It's got to have that logo on there, or it is not a listed filter. Material types are a big one: stainless steel, aluminum, and galvanized. Just to point out, we are importing all of our own filters, the Maverick filter. We very, very little, I don't even think we're still buying any filters from the previous vendor was Research Products in Wisconsin, or Component Hardware in New Jersey. Those are the two other companies. We don't use either of them anymore, except for maybe a few specialty filters, but all of our filters are the Maverick filter, and we do get them in stainless, aluminum, and galvanized. Stainless is pretty much what all the professionals use, and they'll flat out tell their customers don't buy anything else. They just last a lot longer and they're way easier to clean. Aluminum is cheaper, not as cheap as it was pre-COVID. It used to be a huge price difference, and it's not anymore. But aluminum, I mean, if you give it a dirty look, it'll bend. If you use any type of harsh chemical, it'll eat it. It will literally just disintegrate. I mean, not in front of your eyes, but I mean, it'll eat that thing up. And they're just very lightweight. Galvanized is a heavier duty than aluminum. It's very ugly. It's very dull, and it will actually pit. And what that means is when you put a chemical on there, it will get, I mean, it almost feel like reverse sandpaper. Like it will get, after the very first time, it will get little pits in the material. Now try getting grease out of that. That ain't gonna happen. And they turn like a really dark green. You've ever seen like a nickel or a dime that's turned like green, kind of almost like the Statue of Liberty? That's what galvanized will do very quickly. So all the professionals say, just use stainless. You're wasting your time and money with anything else. So material type, stainless, stainless, stainless. Oh, and what I was getting at with the other thing with the Clean Guard at Research Products that we used to use, they actually just announced they're discontinuing galvanized filters. They're not even going to bother with it anymore. And I know with our import, I know our tariffs are higher on galvanized. So when it's all said and done, galvanized isn't really any cheaper than stainless, and it's an inferior product. So always go stainless. Another big one is, and this picture is probably a little too close up. That's the bottom frame of a filter, and that's a little hook that you see there. And there's two of them, one on each side. That's, like I said, that's a little too zoomed in, I think. Some filter or some hoods, the filter actually has to have a little clip or hook on the bottom that attaches to the bottom edge of the hood. So Captive Air is hands down the most well-known hood that you have to have the bottom hooks, or the filters will just fall right out. We carry those. If any item we have that has item number we have with a -H, and that's the FDW number, not the all points number, but the FDW number, if it has a -H, that's H for hook. Now, some people say, well, I don't know if I need a hook or not. Well, do your current filters have a hook? There's your answer. So that's a simple way to answer that. They don't really know, they can't visualize what they mean. If your current filters have a hook, you better buy ones with a hook. That's a big one. People will realize that they did or did not need them after the fact. Spark arresters, they're required with cooking with solid fuel. So briquettes or wood or, you know, whatever kind of barbecue, whatever, that has to have a spark arrestor. Now what that filter is, that's a kind of a grainy picture. I didn't get with my digital people to get some very quality pictures, but you can see them online. All that is a regular filter with that diamond mesh riveted on the front. Then it all of a sudden is now a spark arrestor filter. Now the theory is that if any kind of embers or ash were to float up, you don't want that to get sucked into the vent. An amber of something that could catch flame going into your grease duct would be a nightmare. The funny thing is that that mesh isn't really going to do much. So the reality of the spark arresters is it makes people feel good on paper. It doesn't do a whole lot in the real world, but I'll tell you what, that's the one thing you will get in a lot of trouble on if a fire inspector comes in a place cooking with solid fuel and they don't have that mesh. That's another thing too. It's so easily identifiable. Like you can just see them from a mile away. They'll get in a lot of trouble. So we do sell a fair amount of those. Locking handles. Oh, geez, these things. So if any of our filters, FDW number has a -MH, that's actually for Maryland handle. Here's a worthless little bit of information. The reason they're called Maryland handles is because back in the day, before, you know, hoods were really mass produced like they are now, there were some, either one or two companies in the Maryland area that they made the filters to where instead of them just slide all filters just going to one wide open space, they have an individual frame for each filter. The filter sets into that frame and has these little twisty handles that locks them into that frame. The biggest problem with these is because the hood itself is not necessarily the most standardized size in the world. Someone will order a size and say, oh yeah, that's the size. And if it's off 1/4 of an inch, that locking mechanism won't catch the frame and it doesn't work. And then now they're mad because this is the size I needed. Now it doesn't work. You can get into a lot of back and forth with those Maryland handles. They are a pain, to be quite honest with you. But they do exist. But again, they're only found in that part of the country. Whoops, last slide. And this graphic is very outdated, but it's the only one that gives a real good picture. Size and orientation. Oh my God, that is the biggest thing. We've struggled. The first 5 years was nothing but a struggle. The biggest problem people have is that filters across the industry until recently, they just called them 20 by 20, 16 by 16, 16 by 20, 10 by 12, you know, like they just say size by size. Well, people would reverse the height and width. So you can see on that first one at the bottom there, it's a 10 by 16 and someone would order a 16 by 10. Well, now the filter will fit in there, but the baffles are going to run side to side instead of up and down. So that was a big issue that we had to educate the customer that the height comes first. So we used to have a little pop-up window that would pop up this little graphic and say, hey, are you sure you measured right? And then we just decided, let's just, even though it made the title extremely long on the site, we just added 20 tall by 20 wide. And that solved pretty much everything. There's a big thing with that, with the SEO and searchability, if we were going to disrupt that all. So it's kind of a whole thing, but that solved a lot. But the biggest thing is you got to make sure you're ordering the right height by width and you're not reversing your width and height, because then the baffles run side to side and not serve any function. They have to run up and down. And then the sizing. Now ignore that purple width, the 15 3/4. That was from an old vendor. they're actually 5/8. So all of our Maverick filters are going to be 3/8 smaller than listed size. So a 20 by 20 is really 19 5/8 by 19 5/8. A 16 by 16 is going to be 15 5/8 by 15 5/8. So it's dumb. It's confusing. I wish they would have never started that. But it is what it is. And there's no going back now. So customers need to know that the actual size is not the same of the listed size, and your height and width matter. You can't reverse those. So again, we've solved that with our site by just flat out listing on the post. It'll say 20 tall by 20 wide or 20 tall by 16 wide. We flat out list the tall and wide. I don't know if, I know All Points isn't doing that on the site. I don't know if Tundra is or not, but that's a big one. And then just making sure you're getting your orientation right. And we also list the exact size versus the what we call listed size. Just to give a little color to that, the reason it's done that way is because the two United States or companies in the US that supply hood filters, one Component Hardware Group that makes Flame Guard, which we've used for years. The second one, Research Product, that makes Grease Guard or Clean Guard. They supply filters to Captive Air, who's the biggest manufacturer of hood filters in North America. And when Captive Air says we want our 20 by 20 filters to really be 19 5/8 by 19 5/8, guess what? That's the size you're going to get. So Captive Air said that's what we want, and by God, that's what everyone else had to follow. So that's how that happened that way. So yeah, the biggest thing is going to be your UL listed. That's a huge deal. Material type and actual size versus, what the listed size is. So that's kind of a pretty basic overview of all the filters. I don't know if you guys, what time is it? 10:20. I don't know what time frame you guys have. If you gonna have any questions now, we can go over that. Or if you want to talk about them later, whatever you want to do. But if you have any questions now, we can tackle those, and anything we don't get to, we can
a couple of quick questions.
We can get to that later.
I have a couple of quick questions I want to ask while we're recording because I want to share this with our gasket guys.
Sure, and I can put anything in writing for you too after the fact.
Okay. Inspections. Who does the health inspector check hoods, or is it only the fire inspector?
Fire inspector.
Okay, so it's only the fire inspector.
Yeah.
And you know what to give, that's usually yearly, right?
Well, just to give one more bit of color to that, there is some confusion that people think that the health inspector comes in, and that's why they want the NSF listed. That has nothing. This is only fire, so it's fire inspector. Health inspector won't do anything with filters. So, and annually, it's supposed to be annually, but if you talk to enough places, I mean, there'll be restaurants that say, I haven't seen a fire inspector in 5 years. They're very understaffed, but they're supposed to be annually from the fire department.
Hey, John, to piggyback on Sean's question, would someone like Gasket Guy need any kind of certification, or is there a liability by changing those filters out for their customer base?
Not by changing the filters. Yeah, anyone can put a filter in. You don't have to have any certification. You don't have to have any licensing or anything like that. As long as you're not inspecting the system or signing off on it, you don't have to have any certification or anything like that. But just to sell the filter, you're good to go on that.
Okay, and they're going to be getting their filters from us, which will be UL listed. But if by the chance they went and found some cheap filter somewhere and it wasn't UL listed, would they be held, since they're the one installing it or selling it, would they be held liable if there was an issue or a fire down the road?
Well, okay, so if you go into Joe Blow's restaurant, and you can see, and you can always tell those non-listed filters, because instead of having the rounded front baffle, it's flat. You can see them a mile away. So if you go in there and say, oh, I see you have non-listed filters, that's a bit of a liability for fire code or whatever. again, if you're replacing the existing non-listed filters with listed filters, it kind of voids the whole issue. You're not selling the filter, you're not taking responsibility for the system itself, as long as you're not doing any inspection. So if you're not inspecting the whole system itself, and you're not putting that your check mark to say it's been inspected and cleaned, there really isn't any liability. Now, I guess the one thing it would be a little iffy on, and again, there's no legal standing to this, but I could see a restaurant saying, well, that guy told me XYZ, and there may be, some misunderstanding or things like that. But in the grand scheme of it all, you're just saying, hey, you need new filters. Here are new filters. You're done.
Okay. You mentioned earlier disposing. There's requirements on disposing them. Everybody just throws them in the trash can, which is fine.
I mean,
where are they supposed to take them to the recycling center? What are they supposed to do?
well, that's again, and that's one of those things that there really isn't a set answer. So it's municipality to municipality. The problem they run into is it's not the material that they're concerned about, like that you're throwing away aluminum, stainless steel, or galvanized. It's that you're taking that grease, fats, oils, and grease, and that's supposed to be disposed of in a certain way. What I'm being told from what we're hearing throughout the country is, as long as they're as clean as they can be, and it's not dripping with grease and oil, you're okay to throw them away, because recycling centers won't take it. What do they want? This grease covered. So it's kind of saying nobody really wants it. So as long as they're not dripping with grease and it's dripping out of the dumpster or whatever, that's pretty much what we're hearing. I haven't heard of anyone getting in trouble for that, but there's just kind of, the hood cleaners kind of try to just follow, the right thing to do. But I think as long as they were as cleaned up as they reasonably can be, and just put in a dumpster that's okay to have, whatever put in, but you're not going to get in trouble for not recycling. And there's not enough grease on them to really get in trouble for like disposal of fats, oils, and grease. So it's kind of just that gray area. That would be probably the least of my concern. I just don't see it being that big of a deal.
Okay, sounds good. Custom filters, what is the general lead time? How does that work?
4 to 5 weeks, something like that. It's typically the customs. There shouldn't be a need for custom size filters, but the should is the appropriate word here.
Okay.
It's about a 5 to 6 week lead time.
So you'd say that the 5 or 6 suggested filters you suggested to us, the sizes should cover 95% of what's out there.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of times when we have people that buy custom, they literally just ordered the size that exists because they see 20 by 20 and they say, oh, I need 19 to 5/8 by 9. So they think that's a special order. So even those guys, you don't really need to, but yeah, it's not common at all. And just and a little bit more to that, like Captive Air, they now design their hoods that there's only 3 sizes they use. They got rid of all, like they really narrowed it down. So they only use 3 sizes.
Do you know what those 3 are by chance off the top of your head?
20 by 20, 20 by 16. And then I think for the smaller hoods, it might be 16 by 6. I'd have to double check. And that just got implemented like 6 months ago. So I don't even know if those hoods are out on the market yet.
That's helpful to know.
Yeah.
Okay. And then my only other question, is there any differences in thicknesses? Like AC air filters, you have different thicknesses, 2-inch, 4-inch. Are there?
Oh, that's actually a really good point. I should have brought that up. And that used to be a really big issue where, again, the non-listed filters come 1.5 exactly thickness. Okay. Everybody else's filter is 1 7/8, 1 5/8 to 1 7/8. So it's basically 2 inches. We don't really hear much request for the thinner 1.5. And again, it goes back to those custom made hoods that, that's just what they had. That's how they built it. Again, that's not very common. Probably over 95% of the time, the standard, and that's not just us, it's all component research, all of us make the 1 7/8 inch. And that, again, probably over 95% of the time, that's fine. But again, what I would tell anyone out in the field, pop a filter out, take a look at it, double check that thickness, double check whatever. Now, I don't know if they'll let you do that or not, but before you'd actually, try to install them, just double check what you've already got in there. But again, the thickness isn't that big a deal anymore.
Okay. My last question, are there any, as far as sales pitches go, is there any, like, do you have any advice on like a good sales pitch? A guy goes out, visits a restaurant, what should he be looking for? You mentioned looking for the unlisted filters, missing filters. What's their pitch to someone? Like, hey, you need to replace this filter because of, or what should they look for?
Well, and that's,
you don't have to go into it long.
Yeah, it really is just a matter of missing is the biggest one, or gaps. Like you'll see a filter and they'll have a gap about 2 inches wide, and stuff's just flowing right up through there. So that's the biggest thing, is just having gaps in there. Missing filters is pretty uncommon, but gaps, or if you've got filters that you can just visually look at them and see that they're just caked on grease, they haven't been clean, and you can tell fresh grease from old grease. I mean, you can see.
Right.
So if it's just got that cruddy, crusted, especially around the crevices and the corners, hey, when's the last time you put some new filters in there? But again, the big thing is, are you going to save them labor? I mean, how often are they currently cleaning their filters? Oh, Joe cleans them every Friday night. He stays late and scrubs them or puts them in the dishwasher every once a week. The good thing about having a new set is they clean way easier if you clean them regularly. The efficiency of the system works a lot better. So it's less stress on the exhaust fan that you just paid $1,000 for. The system works better. They're easier to clean. So it's in the bigger picture, it saves time that you're not trying to scrub these things. Joe or whoever isn't having to scrub those things for an hour every night. So the biggest thing is just, let's get a better filter in there that's going to just be easier to maintain. If you maintain the cleanliness of it, the system's going to work better. Your kitchen's not going to fill up with grease or smoke and all that. So it's really, that's the thing, is just those gross, corroded old filters. But I will say, one of the things I'll be curious to see how this goes is, like I said, a lot of these restaurants are, they wait for the hood cleaner to tell them what to do. They always kind of like, I don't know, ask the hood cleaner. Or, so it's kind of a matter of, well, we just buy that stuff from our hood cleaner. Or Joe's hood cleaning, he's coming out next month. We'll wait and see what he has to say. I don't know how much there usually is a pretty decent amount of loyalty to your hood cleaner, because that's the guy you call at 10 o'clock on a Friday night when your fan breaks. So I will be curious to see if there is, well, yeah, we need him, but our hood cleaner, he's always taking care of us, or he comes out and does it. I'll be curious to hear some feedback on that. If they'll say, oh yeah, that's great, I'll buy some, or if they are going to kind of keep that loyalty to their hood cleaner. You just never know, and everybody's different, so you just have to wait and see.
Okay.
Hey, Jen, a couple quick questions. Thank you very much for sharing this with us. I felt like it was really good. I felt like I had my arms around this category, and I definitely learned some things today. So I appreciate that. Couple quick questions. What's the life expectancy, right? I'm sure it varies based on how well they're cleaned and maintained and all that good stuff. But right, I'm trying to understand there's a million restaurants in this country, and right, everyone's got hood filters, and right, everyone's got 8, 10, 12 hood filters. they need to be replaced on average? I mean, every 5 years? What's the average?
Yeah, and that's you hit the nail on the head there. It all depends on their own maintenance. There's restaurants that will not clean their filters between the quarterly cleaning. Those things are going to have to be replaced in a year. I mean, without question. They're going to corrode. They're going to get filled up. A restaurant that takes it seriously, that has a lot of grease, like a Raleigh's burger joint, things like that. That really greasy stuff, and they're soaking them or putting them right into the. I mean, you can put them right in your dishwasher. If you're really maintaining them like you should, those things will last 5 years easily.
Okay.
If you're ignoring it and just pretend it doesn't exist, you're going to have a new set every year. So it's kind of that double-edged sword. Like, we almost wish we didn't educate people so much on how often to clean them, because it's like they're starting to take care of them now, and it's like, dang it. But that's the reality. But the reality of it is too, and you guys know this more than me. I'm not out there in the field, with labor the way it is. Hood filter cleaning gets skipped. It's not putting asses in seats, and it's not contributing to the bottom line. It's not helping payroll. It's actually extending the time it takes them to clean up every night. So filters are always the first to be ignored. And there are restaurants that I don't care. I'll buy a new set every year. I don't give a shit. Like, what do I care? It's like $300. And if it saves me the griping and bitching about who has to do it today, like, so you kind of just have that give and take. It's just really up to them. And they are getting better, but you'll see the chains will take it way more seriously than the mom and pops.
Okay.
So yeah, it could be a year, it could be 5 years. But yeah, you think about, I mean, look at like a stadium that has, 10 different concession areas. I mean, God dang, we have hood cleaners that I think we had a guy that put 50 filters in one location. I mean, 50 filters is no joke. I mean, that's a good chunk of money for us. And keep in mind too, our retail is like 70% margin. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but 70%, 70%. Like, that's a serious margin. So if you're selling a good, 50 filters to a retail place, I mean, even if you give them a discount, you're still getting good margins.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, if it's a commercial kitchen, it has hood filters, and it's that simple. So
John, I had one last question, and we're over time, so trying to respect everyone's time. If you need to drop off the call, we will send out the recording of this.
Yeah.
To anyone that needs to go, understand that. This thing with the hood cleaning companies, how prevalent is that? Just big picture, are half the restaurants out there using a professional hood cleaner?
Well, the hood cleaner, yeah, everyone has to have a hood cleaner, but the filter exchange, where they're coming in swapping your filters out, taking your dirties and put your clean ones in, it depends on where you are in the country. There's some places, Florida, for some reason, they've been doing that forever. Like, they were like one of the first places that started doing it. So it really depends on how much of a foothold the guy doing it has in that municipality. We have a place in Texas, they do the hood cleaning, and all of them do both. Like, if you do filter exchange, you're a hood cleaner, because you've already got the infrastructure set up, you've got the customer base. Those guys will order 500 filters with one order. I mean, it's no joke. I know there's a guy is it Nashville? I want to say Nashville. That dude's one of the biggest hood cleaning companies in the country. He covers, like, I don't know how many states, but he's going gangbusters with that. I mean, he has almost every customer signed up to do the filter exchange. So there's different parts of the country. California is pretty big on it because they take the environment, the wastewater very seriously. I think you're going to see that more and more, but it's going to take a long time to get to that point. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I say that it's catching ground, but to get to every little nook and cranny across the country, it's going to be years before that happens. So.
Got it. Thank you. All right. Any other questions?
If anybody does, like, yeah, if you guys, something pops up, shoot me an email. I mean, I can go all day about this stuff. Anything that I
love
didn't
your
cover.
passion, John.
Well, yeah,
I love your passion.
I'm living the world of hood filters, man. So yeah, well, and one last little tidbit here. The national chain account guys, I think it was I can't keep who's with Tundra and who's with All Points anymore, but they were calling on Darden. Darden has God knows how many restaurants, several hundred, I'm sure. But they were getting some pushback on some documentation of airflow and microns per million and all this. And they ran into a thing where that company really wanted that information. They didn't know what it meant, but by God, they want it. So I had to talk with those guys and kind of walk them through. You will run into weird stuff. They'll just have odd questions. They'll have fire code questions. So that's the thing you can't really train for. You kind of just know. So any of that stuff pops up, just shoot me an email, give me a call, whatever. I can tell you anything you need to know whenever you need to know it. But yeah, just little weird stuff like that comes up. So whatever you guys need, just let me know.
All right.
All right.
Excellent.
I'm going to
Excellent.
stop the recording